So let's start with sine. So we have this graph of sine, f of x equals sine x, oscillates between -1 and 1, has a period 2 pi. And what we do is we cut out this little portion near the origin, and we go out from the origin as far as we can while still maintaining that the function is 1 to 1. So we end up at the top of this hump here and the bottom of this hump here. So just this little piece of sine, and that's what we're going to find the inverse of, just that little piece, because that piece is 1 to 1. See? So it passes the horizontal line test for 1 to 1-ness. And that means that that little piece has a inverse. So we say we restrict the domain to the interval negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. The range remains -1 to 1, as you can see from the illustration. So we have this little function here. It's a piece of a sine function. And these are I just labeled the endpoints. Negative pi over 2, comma, -1, and pi over 2, comma, 1. Now we're going to do the inverse function, which means those endpoints will become -1, negative pi over 2, and 1, comma, pi over 2. But in the meantime, so this is the function we're inverting. F of x equals sine x with the domain negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. And usually sine has the domain all real numbers, but we've restricted it. We've defined it to be smaller. And the range is still -1 to 1, including the endpoints. Okay, and so when I invert it, I get this. The x-axis becomes the y-axis becomes the x-axis, and you reflect that curve across the line y equals x. It looks like this. The endpoints, like I said, the endpoints of this inverse now are 1 pi over 2. You just took these ones here and flipped them backwards, and these ones here and flipped them backwards. So f inverse of x is written this way, sine inverse. This does not mean reciprocal. It does not mean 1 over. When we use a -1 in here, we mean the inverse function. It's just like this, okay, of x. So this is sine inverse of x. And on your calculator, it appears this way, but it's also called the Arcsine. The calculator uses this one because it's shorter than Arcsine. But these are used interchangeably, the inverse sine function and Arcsine. Okay, so you need to know Arcsine. The domain is -1 to 1. It switches the domain, right? So the domain, the range of the sine of this piece of the sine function is the domain of the inverse here, and the domain of this piece of the sine function will be the range of the inverse. Okay, and you have to know these domains and ranges.